If you're getting started with 3D texturing, ArmorPaint is a powerful and beginner-friendly tool that lets you paint directly onto 3D models in real time. It uses a node-based and layer-based workflow similar to popular tools like Substance Painter, but it's lightweight and fast. In this tutorial, you'll learn the complete beginner workflow: importing a mesh, painting textures, baking maps, and exporting texture maps for use in game engines or renderers. No prior experience is required, just a basic understanding of 3D models. The OBJ file is the best supported in ArmorPaint, but you can also use FBX, Blend, and GLTF files. Drag and drop the mesh right into ArmorPaint and choose Import. The viewport is where you can view and paint the model. The Layers panel is where you can control the materials. The Properties panel is where you can adjust the material and layer settings. The Assets panel is where you can see your materials, brushes, and textures. Use the middle mouse button to pan the model. The right mouse button allows you to orbit around the model. Scrolling the middle mouse button zooms in and out. Under Preferences, I would recommend activating Show Asset Names for ease of use. I would also recommend saving often since ArmorPaint is still in active development. It is stable, but just to be sure, save often. Drag and drop the textures into the Textures window. Double-click on the default material to open up the node editor. Materials in ArmorPaint work similarly to those in Blender. At the top of the viewport, I click on Material 1 and change the name to Concrete. It is very important to not have the two windows overlapping, or you won't be able to actually change the material name. Delete the color node by selecting it and hitting Delete on the keyboard. Drag each texture map into the node window and connect them to the proper inputs in the material output node. To see the material on the model, drag and drop the concrete material onto the model. In order to apply the concrete only to the steps and door frame, change the selection from Shared to Door Frame. Search for a mapping node and change the scale to 3. Connect the mapping vector to each of the texture nodes. Search for a UV map node and connect it to the mapping node. To change the tint of the color, search for a mix color node. Search for a color node and change the color. Connect the color node to the top color of the mix color node. And connect the color texture to the bottom color of the mix color node. Connect the mix color node to the base color of the material output. Right-click on the concrete layer and duplicate it, and change from door frame to steps. Make a new material and change the name to metal. Delete the color node. Drag each texture map into the node window and connect them to the proper inputs on the material output node. To see the material on the model, drag and drop the metal material onto the model. Change the selection from shared to hinge. Search for a mapping node and change the scale to 2. Connect the mapping node vector to each of the texture nodes. Search for the UV map and connect it to the mapping node. Right-click on the metal layer and duplicate it, and then change from hinge to knob. Duplicate it once more and then change from knob to ring. Make a new material and change the name to wood. Delete the color node. Drag each texture map into the node window and connect them to the proper inputs on the material output node. To see the material on the model, drag and drop the wood material onto the model. Change the selection from shared to door. Search for a mapping node and change the scale to 5. Connect the mapping vector to each of the texture nodes. Search for the UV map node and connect it to the mapping node. You can now bake the texture maps. Select the Bake tool and click on Bake in the header menu. To export the maps, go to File, Export, Textures. Select Export and then select your file location and naming convention. Now learn the full beginner workflow in ArmorPaint, importing a mesh, painting materials, baking essential maps, and exporting textures for production use. While it may feel like a lot at first, the key is to practice. Start with simple objects, experiment with layers and materials, and gradually build up complexity. Over time, you'll develop an eye for realistic textures and efficient workflows. If you want to go further, the next steps will be learning node-based materials, using custom texture maps, integrating with Blender, Unity, or Unreal. Keep experimenting. Texturing is both a technical skill and an art. Thanks for following along with this tutorial. If you found this helpful, please like, comment, and subscribe. Have a good day.